Here's Johnny. I'll be back.
And you will know my name is the Lord. And I'm walking here.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Groovy.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Box Office Pulp. Joining me tonight, we've got Mike Napier, MB, and your host, me, Cody, Flexo, Flex Killington, the Flexizilla, whatever you want to call me, I don't fucking care. Anyways,
Captain
we're here
Flex
today.
America.
No, that's too far. That's too much.
You didn't have a funny intro?
No, I wasn't prepared. That's how much I care about our listeners.
Mike gets a mini bop. It doesn't matter as much.
Right? Yeah, nobody listens to that. Anyways, we're here today to discuss what could be the biggest box office draw of the summer, Avengers: Age of Ultron.
Of many summers, actually. It's currently sitting at 6th of all time in box office gross, so, you know.
I thought it hit number 5 today.
It was nearing number 5. But I think actually it's just nearing number 5 domestically, because it's nearing 900. Like, it's gonna be the 5th film to hit 900 billion, which is, I don't know what the audience at home, how they quantify money, but 900 billion is a lot of pesos.
Well, you gotta bring pesos into it.
I measure everything in yen.
That's just the way the world's going now, MB. I don't know why you're falling back on the peso.
Can we look at the important thing here? This is a mere pittance in the foothills of Money Mountain.
Do I have to pay that in 1/20th of a pittance?
It's the only way. That's how they made this movie, actually. It was just based on stocks of pittances.
You actually have to cut the bill in half.
That's actually how much they paid the editing guy, because, good lord.
Why can't you pay people with, like, just half a bill, and it counts as half as a dollar?
Like, just take out a pair of scissors, cut a dollar bill in half, and just say, here, this covers the 50 cents.
Yes. Why can't that work?
It should be like old-timey pirate money, you know, like pieces of 8, where you could break off little chunks of your silver.
Because this country is ran by communists. You hear that, Obama?
Getting political here on Box Office Pulp.
Oh, man, topical. I don't like topical. It dates things. Besides the fact we're talking about a summer blockbuster.
Also,
anyways.
I don't think communists quite date it. I mean, they might date it back to the 70s, but, you know.
Look, man, I want people from the year 2500 look back at this show and be like, what's a commie? I don't want that. I don't want that at all.
Why aren't they more enthused about talking about Age of Ultron?
Yes.
To which I can't answer that question. I really can't.
Yeah, I don't really... This film has a weird journey for me in terms of it one day being the biggest thing that would have ever come out since sliced bread, the sequel to one of the greatest comic book movies ever made, to the next stage being, well, we saw that.
Yeah, it was weird.
And it's like, it's not even really, because it's like, it's not a bad film or anything, it's just more like, huh.
I don't want to say Marvel fatigue, but I think I'm getting sick of their formula of each movie involves a threat that could destroy either the world or the galaxy.
Now,
so when we get to Ultron, and this should be an Avenger movie, this is like where the biggest baddie should be. This is the big threat that calls for the big guns to all gather. And we get Ultron, who's basically like, yeah, I'm gonna blow up the world. And it's like, yeah, you and like 9 other bad guys that we just saw. Like, why are you special?
I do feel that way about the Marvel films at this point. Is I feel like the big world-spanning stuff should be saved for the bigger films, not just. I mean, Guardians, it made sense, but
yeah, well, Guardians was more like we're threatening this whole other world isolated from itself and potentially the universe, but right now we're just focusing on this one.
Yeah, but they're also the Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, their job is to stop the entire galaxy from getting blown up.
It would be weird if it was a smaller plot, but yeah.
Yeah, and I look at the other Marvel films for like the first half of Captain America: The Winter Soldier. That was fantastic, and it was basically just Captain America trying to figure out what kind of conspiracy was going on around him. Like, big stakes for him, but not for the world. And then by the time they get into the aircraft carrier designed to blow up, you know, a third of the population or whatever it was, it became less interesting, which is weird because the stakes were raised.
Yeah, and I must admit to being a little disappointed in Ultron's plan, which I didn't think even made that much sense. I mean, I know it's Ultron, so he's crazy, but his motivation I thought was a little kind of murky and plain. As much as I enjoyed Ultron,
It felt to me like there was actually more there that they had filmed and scripted and everything, but everything was just cut down with this movie. That's what really my biggest disappointment with it is that it feels like you're watching something that you saw half of.
Yeah, it's what 2.5 hours long, but there's a feeling of needing. Yeah, it's brisk. There's a feeling of needing more. I think it's weird we're starting by immediately coming down on the film, which is weird, but I do think as much as I enjoyed the film, I think in the scripting phases, it needed to be streamlined a bit. There was a bit too much going on.
Well, also, in a weird way, there's also the problem that it was almost too streamlined in that in the editing room, they just decided, well, we're going to try to fix the problems of the script having too much, but we're going to create even more problems by, like, having this big opening sequence last, like, less than 5 minutes, it felt like.
It was odd. Like, I still was really surprised Ultron's born and is immediately evil within 30 seconds.
Yeah.
As much as I did love Ultron's birth scene, it was weird to see him then walk out and become the villain of the film. Right.
Yeah, that was, especially considering, like, Stark and Banner were convinced that there was no way he could even activate because they were trying for, like, a good day and a half to get him to come online. Then they were like, screw it, let's just go party. Then
I do love that.
He just boots up by himself. It's like, what? Wait, what?
I do love the fact that we're about ready to give up after like 3 days. Like, well, we haven't reinvented artificial intelligence. Damn it, it's impossible. It's been like 3 days, guys.
Don't give up.
It's too long. It's too much.
They had people to entertain, but it is like the film has its share of problems. It has a lot of problems, I would say, but none like that are movie damning. Like in the way that Thor: The Dark World has a bunch of problems. That movie is 99% problems. Iron Man 3 is like 78% problems and the other percent just being weird. But Avengers Age of Ultron has so many problems and yet has so many good things about it to balance out those problems that it's just kind of in this weird middle area where it's like, I like the movie, but at the same time, it's like I can't stop thinking about what could have been done better, but at the same time, I don't know whose fault that is because it's so hard to track like where that went wrong.
It's interesting to compare it to the first film in that, I mean, the Avengers as a film has a fair share of problems. I think we discussed this in the episode we did on it, which is it has its problems, but no one really the rest of the film sort of makes up for it, so you never really focus on the problems. You have to kind of think about it.
And honestly, those problems kind of, for me anyway, they kind of go away with time. Whereas, like, the more I watch that film as time goes on, the more it's like, I can just, now that I've got it out of my system, that I've accepted those flaws, it's like I kind of just focus on it as a whole, and it makes it good. Whereas this one, it's like, you think about it more, and granted, it's only been out since May, but it's more of a head scratcher, where it's like, why were these decisions made?
Yeah, Ultron's problems stand out a bit more.
Yeah, Ultron's problems stand out a lot because he's being introduced in this movie and also being taken out in the same movie, so you only have one film to kind of do him justice, and he's not really done that much justice. I mean, he is done well in terms of the fact that Spader's awesome, and Whedon clearly has like a passion for the character, but there's also like a lot of stuff they didn't get into with him, like the whole fact that he's discerned from Tony Stark's consciousness, essentially.
Yeah, they seem to imply a lot about Ultron's character, but never really got into it. The whole, daddy issue thing. That's classic Ultron, and it's hinted at in the film, but it's never. He just acts weird. I mean, he's memorable. I would say he's one of the more memorable Marvel villains so far.
Well, yeah, but to be fair, also that you're comparing him to like Ironmonger.
True.
But at the same time, it's like, with Ultron, I would say that it was kind of expected that he would have a different take. Like, for one thing, he's different from the comics in that he's not created by Hank Pym. He doesn't come from Wonder Man or whatever the hell. Or is that the Vision?
That's the Vision.
Okay, yeah. Vision.
The soul of Wonder Man.
He doesn't discern from that specific source. He comes from Tony Stark and Banner, so he's like, you can forgive all the, like, weird changes to his character, like him being more snarky, because that's Stark. Like, he's a child of Stark and stuff like that. So that stuff, like, can be forgiven, but it's like, then you go into what his actual motivations are, and he's just kind of, I don't like humans. I don't like humanity. Humanity is destroying itself, and I want to destroy it.
They just threw in Skynet, pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, he's Skynet. And I like they had the Vision pretty much imply, and I thought that was more interesting, that Ultron is essentially lashing out just because he's afraid of everything around him.
Yeah.
It seems way more interesting to get into than just mentioning it once or twice, kind of offhandedly.
And also, like you said, it's like he has a whole thing with Stark. Like, they have one scene together, basically. I mean, they have, like, a couple scenes, but they really only have one scene that's important. And it's mostly off-screen because you have to focus on the other characters fighting, too. And the dream sequences and all that. So it's just kind of... it's a lot of good ideas thrown out there that just don't get any payoff.
Yeah, and considering that a father-son dynamic as history is so important to the Tony Stark character, even though we never obviously see Tony and Howard interact, that you would think that would, the idea of that would extend to Tony and Ultron. So.
I never even thought of that. That's actually a really good point, because, I mean, Howard is endued with such an importance in these movies. I mean, especially this continuity, because, you know, you get to see Howard as played by Dominic Cooper, like in the other films. You get to see him before he's even Tony's father, so you have more of an investment in him as a character, so it's not just this foreshadowing, like, flashback figure. It's this dude who's been in other stuff. So he's incredibly important to Tony Stark. Why isn't this more of a thing with him and Ultron? I never even considered that, but yeah, that's an excellent point.
Cody, thoughts?
I think the issue, for me, maybe the way I see it, is that they're using this as a stepping stone for Civil War storyline. If you pay attention to Tony throughout the movie, he pretty much denies having any culpability in creating Ultron, even though everyone's pointing their finger at him like, you fucked up.
Yeah.
His response is, well, I made him, but not on purpose. It was on accident. I just left him running, and all of a sudden he became this way.
Well, see, my big problem with the whole thing is that there's not enough of that. Like, there's not even enough of that for me, because it feels like they just kind of skim over the fact that Stark created Ultron. Like, Fury comes up to him and says, you know, look at what you did, and, you know, you kind of messed up here, and the other teammates, like, there's a moment where Thor chokes him briefly, but it's more out of anger for losing the scepter that Loki had than actually creating Ultron. It's like, the big thing with Ultron in the comics is that it paints Hank Pym as a pariah among the Avengers, because he's this thing that created this ultimate evil. And with Tony, it's like, you would think that would even be greater, because he's one of the greatest heroes in that universe. He's the figurehead, essentially, of Marvel, and all of a sudden he's doing this thing that ultimately nearly annihilates the planet.
This was an issue. This was probably my biggest issue with the film. And there's only a couple that really nag at me, but Tony essentially not having any kind of character arc in the film itself. His only real basis of an arc is that he comes to accept, you know, being part of a team, and there actually needing to be a team player, which he then immediately retires from, off screen essentially.
Yeah, which is weird. Which is so strange, because it's like we had that whole thing in Iron Man 3, which I'm not complaining that they ignored that. I don't care that they ignored that. I'm fine with them ignoring that, because it was stupid. But the whole thing about him just kind of, like, it's implied that he has guilt over it when he looks at himself in the mirror and kind of looks disgusted while he's driving over to the new Avengers headquarters at the end. But there really doesn't seem to be anything, like, going on upstairs regarding... He's more or less just spending the entire film justifying his reason for creating Ultron, and then never seeing that he's wrong, because immediately, first chance he gets, he tries to redo it.
Yeah, he just comes across as aloof and, quite frankly, fairly unlikable.
Well, the way I've seen it portrayed or explained was all of Tony's actions are kicked off from his experience with Scarlet Witch's vision that she shows him. Everything he does is him essentially trying to protect the Avengers. He's worried that his friends are going to die and he's not going to be able to protect them. So, if that means he has to redo his experiment to make the vision come back, even though it's repeating what he did wrong before, that's what he's got to do. Because originally, it was his plan to make a defense system that can protect everyone on the planet all the time. And he screwed up the first time, but that doesn't mean he shouldn't try again. So I think that was his motivation through here. He just wants to protect everyone, and he's not learning from his mistakes. And it puts him on an edge, it makes him look like a jerk, and that's going to continue to be something we see in Civil War when it's him against Captain America.
Yeah, I understand, setting up Civil War in that way and extending it to Civil War. And obviously, I think
especially considering that you need to have Tony suddenly have a reason to go after Captain America and the rest, because to just have that explained in Civil War itself would take a good portion of, it would take a good portion of the screen time and just not have a fallout to it.
And I feel like maybe Civil War will be dealing with Tony essentially projecting his own guilt for Ultron out. Yeah. But I just felt like there needed to be some sort of private moment with Tony where he's not just justifying. Like his motivation was understandable and made sense. I liked the scene with Fury in the barn where he essentially explains why he did all this, and then why he tries to create the Vision later on.
I even like that scene between him and Steve where they're chopping wood and he just kind of makes the argument. It's like, isn't the point that we're supposed to end the mission? Like, why does it always have to be this constant fight? And then Steve just kind of breaks the thing and just says, it's not about taking the easy way out. That was a good scene, but it just sits there.
Yeah.
It's more like there's this idea that was thrown out, let's not do anything with it and move on to the next scene.
A stronger through line for that character. It was just needed, but it's kind of the problem with Iron Man in any of the films, really, is that his character arc just never really goes anywhere or ends. Like, that's something I'm worried about with Civil War. Like, is this going to be finished in Civil War, or is it still going to be, fairly open-ended?
Like, he got a good character arc, I would say, in the first film, because the entire basis of it was him turning from that prick to a superhero. And there was even, like, bits and pieces of an arc there in Iron Man 2 to maybe an even greater extent, but like Iron Man 3 just completely convoluted it. And then you have this, which is just bringing in this entirely new element and not doing anything with it. And then the element just ends. Like, Ultron's never coming back. There's no need for him to come back.
One thing, too, I don't think Tony's ever expressed any amount of guilt for any of the bad guys he's inspired. He doesn't consider that something he's directly responsible for because each person's responsible for their own actions. He's expressed guilt over the weapons he's made or the choices he personally made, but he doesn't blame himself for Stain becoming, Ironmonger or Vanko, becoming Whiplash or any of the stuff in Iron Man 3, even though that was directly due to him basically standing up to Killian.
Which I don't think
he's going to blame himself for making Ultron either. He's just that kind of guy.
But with that, there's a difference, though, I think, because with Vanko and Stain and even Killian, you could easily just say, well, those guys were psychopaths. They took something completely the wrong way. They had evil motivations from the beginning. They were their own creators. They just focused all their hatred on Tony. Whereas Tony literally built Ultron from the ground up. And
but he doesn't really see it that way.
Yeah,
they even cover it in the film. He talks about the fact that I just plugged him in and then he figured himself out. So same deal. He just feels this is something that happened. This is a lunatic machine that took something he said out of context and ran with it. So I don't think Tony's ever programmed to feel guilt about this kind of character, which is strange because in most movies that's how they would design the arc. He would feel guilt over something like this. And I don't think they have any interest in doing that in this movie or any of the future movies. This is not part of his arc. It's just a set of circumstances needed to make Ultron.
Yeah, but what I think is the problem is that with Ultron, that was supposed to be where it did change, because like you have the perfect evidence to go, aha, no, you are wrong, Tony. Like Cap, right? Like whenever Cap confronts him, whenever he's trying to rebuild Ultron essentially, and they have a mini fight, basically showcasing what's to come in Civil War. There should have been something more there, and instead you have the Vision being born, and that kind of upstages everything, and then they go into third act mode. Like, every time something potentially good could have come out of that, something else just kind of gets in the way, which almost makes me think this could have been like a good Iron Man 4 instead of a good Avengers 2 or something. I don't know. It's hard to tell, because for the most part, I like how the other characters were handled. Like, I like how Hawkeye specifically was handled. Big improvement over the first movie. I love even though people found it strange and off-putting and weird because it was just out of nowhere, I actually did like the Banner and Natasha stuff because that was kind of an interesting character arc for those two. I liked where Captain America was generally at. He kind of didn't have much of a character arc, but he got enough, I think. Because the first movie had a lot of him in there. I felt like this one was kind of justified in kind of peeling back the development of that character.
Yeah, the first movie really focused, on the big three, Thor, Iron Man, Captain America, more so than anyone else, and a little bit on Hulk on the side. And this one, it feels like they're trying to make up for that, so okay, we're going to spend more time with Black Widow, we're going to spend more time with Hawkeye, a lot more time with Bruce Banner. And I can understand that. However, it feels like you're shortchanging the stars of your series, because everyone essentially is there for the big three.
Yeah. The only one of the big three that really needed more was just Tony himself. Marvel really has any idea what to do with Thor, so that's why he goes off in his own mini movie for a little while.
Yeah, it's a weird subplot that just doesn't feel like it's needed. It's just set up for the next Thor.
I would argue, actually, even though Tony needed the most development and needed the most done with his character and was the most shortchanged on that end, Thor was shortchanged in general. Like, he just might as well not have been in there.
Yeah, they literally had to come up with these huge to remove him from the farmhouse, essentially.
Yeah,
because they didn't know what to do with him there.
I guess my problem is, the thing I like most about Whedon's writing is always how he's able to pair up these characters and have them play off each other. You get a kind of antagonistic relationship between Tony Stark and Steve Rogers. So that works out great. You really enjoy seeing those two kind of bicker back and forth and still be friends. But then you also get closer relationships like Hawkeye and Black Widow, where that really works together, or, Black Widow and Bruce Banner. However, then he gets into, like, the general action or plotting, and I don't give two shits about what he writes there. Like, whenever it's an action scene, I actually kind of tuned out. I wanted more stuff like the barn scene, or more stuff where, like, they're arguing over whether an elevator is worthy of lifting Mjolnir. Those are the kind of things I think Whedon excels at, those character moments. And he needs someone with him that can handle the rest of the stuff. Like, he needs to be partnered on his writing to really take care of the rest of that.
Well, see,
he needs a Drew Goddard at all times, is what I'm saying.
I agree. Well, one thing that I kind of say to combat that is that actually did work out well in the first Avengers. I thought the action in that was actually really well handled, especially for Whedon, who's not really an action guy, like you said.
I guess my problem with the first one is it's overwhelming. You get half a movie that's an action scene, so it works okay, but sometimes I'm just not feeling it when I watch that. And in the second movie, he kind of repeats that by saying, okay, we're just going to have a mob of robots they have to mow through that don't really matter. And to me, as a viewer, it's just not interesting to see Ultron bot after Ultron bot get smashed.
I did think the action in this film was way better done, just better directed and filmed and put together and choreographed. But I do believe the third act of this film went on too long because it's them just smashing CGI robots at a certain point. And
like, I have no idea how many robots there are. There are no real stakes. I'm like, I guess they're just going to keep punching robots until they decide to wrap the movie up.
Literally half the third act was trying to figure out what they were even going to do.
And one thing that would have been interesting, I think, because they had this implied by the end of the movie, is that instead of having them just smash robot after smash robot, just have Ultron jump from robot to robot. So it's like he could literally be anywhere among that group. Because the last thing he does as a ditched effort is to jump into a different robot body. So have his prime version be blown up, and then there's this mob that's still coming after them. Any one of them could be Ultron's new host body. And it's kind of just trying to weed out through that to try and find him while he goes off and, like, uses that as a distraction to kind of keep forwarding his plan and bring it that much closer to fruition.
Whedon didn't seem to know what to do with Ultron in a fight. This is a problem also with just Ultron in the comics. Ultron's not even really that much of a combatant in the comics. But, pretty much like, Ultron can be anywhere and put himself in any body. Except when it comes to the third act, then off screen, we've removed his ability to upload himself to the internet. So he's stuck in his robot bodies, just for this fight.
Well, I guess it wasn't really off screen. That was during his confrontation with Vision. They explicitly mentioned that he, kind of disabled him.
True, it felt a little Deus Ex Machina to me. Well, I guess the helicarrier fall more, maybe a little bit more into that than anything else.
I think that was one of those tie-in, like if you watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., they were kind of hinting at trying to set that up, which it seems like a weird thing because no one really watches that show in comparison to the movies.
It was weird they would fall back on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for that plot.
And still not introduce Coulson.
Well, to me, it was Honestly, I was fine with that, because I like the payoff of Cap saying what S.H.I.E.L.D. should be, and I like the fact that that was their in for having War Machine show up. Even though he was in there very quickly and very briefly, like, it was very enjoyable to see him.
Yeah, I didn't mind I honestly, people seem to really be bothered by the helicarrier, but something didn't really cross my mind that much.
Yeah, and people
it didn't really offend me. It was just there.
People act like them bringing back one helicarrier is essentially just saying, well, Winter Soldier is completely undone now. It's like, no. Fury's still out there. He still has access to tech. This doesn't mean S.H.I.E.L.D. is back.
I was more confused as to the fact that Fury goes off saying he's going to do something dramatic. And something dramatic is he gets a helicarrier. But unless he was anticipating Ultron's kind of outlandish plot to lift up a giant chunk of the Earth and drop it onto the Earth, what was he going to do with the helicarrier?
It's always good to have a helicarrier.
That was his thought line, like, I guess we just need a gigantic helicopter thing.
Oh, what is Fury?
Well, did you see the first movie? I mean, it can turn invisible.
I'm just saying, like, what if he'd shown up with the helicarrier and Ultron was arming nuclear bombs all around the world? He'd be like, oh, fuck. I did not think this one through.
Well, then he would promptly drive the helicarrier into Ultron. See?
So Ultron's plot, I mean, while insane, was just kind of weird, right?
It was. On the second viewing, it gelled a little better for me, just because you pick up on more of Ultron's very symbolic, oh, I like this church because it's in the center of the town, and his talk about dinosaurs and extinctions and how he's trying to remove human beings, so he wants to basically drop a meteorite on them. And I kind of get that. It works well enough. It seems a little goofy. And it's also weird in comparison because they talk about how Ultron's also trying to get the nuclear code so he can just blow everyone up with nukes. So it's like he went for the most logical plan first, that failed, then he went, fuck it, I'm going to steal all the most valuable metal in the world and make a giant meteorite and plow it into the Earth. Like, he went for the most logical plan to the most absurd plan without anything in between the two.
Literally rising a town into the stratosphere.
He literally put rockets to the bottom of a city.
Yes.
Which is kind of amazing in terms of comic book ridiculousness. Like, that's the way I took it. But at the same time, it doesn't really make any thematic sense because, like...
Even better, the rockets are designed to reverse so they can speed the chunk of metal towards Earth faster. Instead of just, why don't the rockets just turn off when it reaches terminal velocity?
It was a weird plan.
It was unusual.
I did like the idea of the third act essentially being the Avengers fighting on top of this floating thing.
Yeah, I mean, it was comic booky and Avengers is all shit, but
yeah,
it just, like, even from a visual standpoint, it just looked kind of like, it's kind of silly. I guess I was still kind of disappointed by Ultron's ultimate plan of being an evil robot who's going to wipe out all of humanity because he's mad at them.
I feel like it was more the way it was pulled off rather than the actual plan itself, because the actual plan itself, that's Ultron.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue there, it is.
I feel like we're just going to have to get used to Marvel not making villains that seem all that amazing. Like
meanwhile, Wilson Fisk can exist.
Well, that was like in a TV show, so they had plenty of time to work on that character and make him a real character. I don't think for a film called Age of Ultron, they couldn't spend that much time on Ultron, and that's a bummer.
I think that's the ultimate disappointment, is that Ultron was supposed to be this big, huge, just gigantic, massive deal. And Ultron is a massive deal to the Marvel Universe itself, and he's just a one-off Avengers villain in an Avengers film that ultimately not a lot, there's not a lot of ill effects other than setting up Civil War. Like,
actually, now that I think about it, what would have been awesome is if instead of this being just, oh, he's the villain for this movie, what if this was actually just the origin of Ultron, and then he went off and he was going to be in future movies?
Yeah, like if they showed one of the Ultron bots sneaking off the end of the movie, I think.
Like an inversion of the superhero origin trope. It's like, okay, here's a supervillain origin trope, and it's Ultron because he's the Avengers' arch nemesis aside from Kang, which for some weird rights reason they can't use.
Yeah.
That was weird to find out.
Yeah, well, he made his first appearance in the Fantastic Four story, didn't he?
Yeah.
So technically, I don't know, you think they could pull off some sort of a Quicksilver deal? Where Fox and they could have, a piece of his character as long as he's different enough.
Speaking of which, the twins, to me, like, their implementation in the actual movie was kind of short-sighted.
Yeah, I enjoyed them quite a bit whenever they were on screen, but
I've actually never been a fan of Scarlet Witch, but in terms of this movie, I actually love Scarlet Witch. I can't wait to see more of that character.
I still feel like they couldn't quite figure out how to determine her powers.
Well, that's always been the problem with Scarlet Witch.
Yeah, even the comics can't do that.
Nobody knows what the powers are.
Yeah, she's just weird.
Chaos magic.
Winds of Destiny change. But I think it's like the beginning of the film where they're fighting Strucker. We're essentially seeing the third act to an Avengers film we skipped over.
Yeah.
And then they kill Strucker, which confuses me. So Hydra's just gone now?
That's what it makes it seem like. Like they're just done with Hydra. Like they don't have any real plans for Hydra anymore, I guess.
It just kind of really shit on Winter Soldier. Like I didn't understand there's no reason to kill Strucker. Let him be in prison. He can be broken out later, and you guys can use him. It's Baron Strucker, fucking head of Hydra.
Yeah.
So I don't understand
because that guy was like signed for a multi-picture deal and everything.
Yeah, and I mean, looking up information, there was lots of backstory with Strucker and the twins and all that were like made up for the film, but was not actually included. That sounded really interesting. Strucker was
like, it goes back to my problem with it. It's like there seems to be more there, and it's always lurking on the surface, and it's clearly something that was already filmed and already written. Like the whole cave sequence. There's an entire scene there that happened, and we don't know what the extent of that is. In the movie,
Did they make Eric Selvig actually important to that scene in the longer version, you think?
Did they make that scene important?
Yeah. It's so weird, because, like, it's essentially boils down to, in the final finished film, Thor goes into a cave, they cut away, they cut back, he's in a pool, and then he's shouting.
I saw stones!
I still
It makes him look crazy.
I still don't understand why they felt they needed to set up Infinity War in this film. Like, I thought you can use, Ragnarok for that, or you can use Guardians 2 to help, set that up more. And you have Infinity War as a 2-part film. It just seemed like a bad move to shove that into Age of Ultron.
I think what the mindset behind that was, and I agree, but I think the reason they did that was because they felt like, well, we maybe kind of fooled the audience into thinking Thanos was going to be the second movie's villain, so maybe we should try and make up for that by having him still have a presence, even though he doesn't really have a presence.
I'm very confused by the ending. Like the little clip of Thanos where he was like, gotta do it myself.
The most stupidest after-credit scene I've ever seen.
I was just confused, like, who failed you this time? Unless he's saying this immediately after Loki fucked up, or right after Guardians of the Galaxy, like, this doesn't make any sense.
And how confused would the general audience have been? Like, way to leave everybody in the dust.
Yeah, or are they trying to imply that he was secretly pulling the strings behind Ultron the entire time?
That was the worst inclusion of anything. I should not have been in there at all.
Yeah, they need to quit screwing around with Thanos and make him actually do something.
I mean, they are going to. Infinity War, but it's just weird that, like, it seems like a lot of what made Marvel's films work when they were starting out is starting to kind of blow up in their face, where it's like, we have to have an after-credit scene in every movie. Well, sometimes a movie doesn't warrant an after-credit scene. But it becomes this, like, traditional formulaic thing where it's like you have to place it in every single movie. What happens when you don't have an idea for one? Well, you still have to put one in there because the studio says. And that's actually kind of something Whedon brought up in an interview, is like there's a Marvel method now to filmmaking, which is for every scene you want to have in a movie, Marvel has a Marvel scene they want you to include, whether or not you actually want the scene in there. Which is really detrimental, and I don't get it, because, like, it's not like Warner Brothers went after Batman Begins, told Nolan, okay, now this must happen. It's like, no, they kind of just let him go off, and he made The Dark Knight.
And even Gunn has talked about that. I mean, that he, had to put Thanos in there, and it was the hardest scene he's done. And it's an amazing scene that he just had to work at it. But
it was just better at rolling with the ball than Whedon was, because I could see Whedon being more into his own stuff. In terms of, like,
Whedon, no.
If you listen to any interview with that guy after Avengers 2 came out, he just sounds beat down, just like, ugh.
Well,
I did it, I guess.
he's made it very clear. I mean, from the beginning, even before like he started production on this film, he kind of made it clear that this was going to be the last one he was going to do. So you have to wonder, it's like, what was that process even like for that guy?
And some Marvel and Marvel world building things that they want in there work fine. It's just that there's a couple that sometimes get through that just don't jive, like the Infinity stuff in this film. Like Tony's vision in the beginning that Scarlet Witch gives him, perfect. Okay, and it helps drive the plot, it's integrated, and it hints at something coming in the future. Thor tripping out in a pool that we've never heard of, that's mystical, that we've never heard of, with a Thor character to see the Infinity Stones, so that way the Avengers know what the fuck is going on.
Nah.
Completely pointless.
Yeah, and especially considering it just feels like a tack on from what was his other big scene, which was his dream sequence that was all about foreshadowing Ragnarok.
Which I thought was fine because it was very brief.
Yeah, and also, I mean, you had Idris Elba coming in just being crazy at Thor, which was amazing. And apparently Hiddleston was going to be in that scene, but, like, ultimately it just, it has the Iron Man 2 problem, like in a lot of respects.
It just, and going back to the twins is what started us on this little drive. As much as I like them, I don't know if they should have been in this film. Though I liked how they were worked into the plot. I enjoyed Quicksilver's death. I liked Scarlet Witch's integration to the end of the film, but
And Olsen and Johnson were actually really good in the parts. Like,
I like them. It just they felt like they were out of a completely different film.
Yeah, I felt like if anything, they should have almost had their own film, or at least had a film where they weren't so clearly overshadowed. Because
after Days of Future Past, their Quicksilver to me just didn't quite measure up, so I was fine to see him go.
Yeah, well, nobody can measure up to that Quicksilver.
I know, it's fantastic.
To be fair, it's Quicksilver, so unless he goes over the top dickish, you can't really make him work unless Evan Peters. But I mean, like, their inclusion in the film is really just kind of the big problem because it feels like there was an idea in one draft that existed for Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver to have a big part. Then they immediately just kind of turn? ?
Well, they give Ultron two characters to play off of.
Yeah.
And then you never really get into Ultron's head. So they end up just being there as villains until they turn on Ultron.
Yeah, I guess really they weren't used for the purpose that they could have been used for, which was Ultron just expounding dialogue at them and revealing like what was actually going on.
And in a way, they were integrated into Ultron well because they hated Tony Stark because Stark weapons killed their family and bombed their town, and they're teaming up with what is essentially a Stark weapon.
Yeah.
And once again, needed to play more into Tony's arc in some way, but
yeah, there was never even a scene of them just acknowledging like, oh, we're fighting alongside Iron Man now.
They
like,
never even interacted.
No. Like, and even though Iron Man's right there with them in the group at, like, when they're fighting all the Ultron bots at the end, it's like, not one of them even makes, like, a glare towards him. It's so weird. And I get that the whole point of it is like, oh, well, Ultron's a greater evil than they even realized, and they have to stop him because what he's doing is immoral, and I thought it was kind of well handled on Scarlet Witch's part, less so on Quicksilver's because he's just kind of there. But ultimately, it just doesn't lead anywhere. It's more of an excuse to just get them on the team. The entire film is just an excuse to get Scarlet Witch on the team because Quicksilver, I mean, he's just, he is the most, he is the most.
They leave him dead. I don't want any more characters coming back. I'm getting a little tired of the Marvel psych out.
Well, I mean, he is the single most inexplicably dead character. They focused on that corpse way more than, like, almost to a comical degree.
And that seems
they should have blown his head right off. Like, it was just a giant chunk of his skull missing, so everyone knew, oh, this guy's dead.
And Whedon himself seemed to want to leave him alive, but his death was apparently a Marvel mandate.
Which is weird, because most people want more deaths to stick, so it was weirdly like Marvel was giving the fans what they wanted, but at the same time doing it in a weird way. Because people are kind of getting... The biggest problem that a lot of people seem to have is the fact that nobody actually dies in these movies. So killing off an actual character should have been a good response to that, but instead it's like, it just feels corporate.
It feels like that's how they're trying to make the Avenger movies special now. Okay. We've already had all the Avengers get together, but we're going to do that in a couple other movies that aren't Avenger movies. What can we do now? We'll actually kill someone this time. We'll bump off a character.
Which I think is a slippery slope to get into, because then you end up having to do, like, that's your big thing that's going to happen, and everyone's going to start to wonder who's going to die in this Avengers film. But I think what Age of Ultron needed was something more damaging to the universe at large. Not just, like, even if a major character died, even if Captain America died, it's still not, there needed to be something that would change things, not just they fought a villain, then they defeated the villain, and
it feels like there
and then
should have
randomly
been,
decide to reform the team.
like there should have been more of an emphasis on the fact that Ultron is different from, like, say, Alexander Pierce. Like, Ultron left a hole, left a mark, left a scar on the world itself. Like, he should have, like, maybe one thing they could have actually done is actually have him succeed and kill, like, millions of people. I mean, yeah, it would have been grim, but at least it wouldn't have been Superman doing it, as opposed to, like...
Well, there is, like, a missing Czechoslovakian village now. If that
is true.
counts for anything.
They're all homeless.
That's true. Millions. No, thousands.
Yeah, it was just, they defeated the villain, and then the only thing that was ever lingered on was a banner lingering on his attack in Wakanda.
Yeah, and then that led to him leaving that team, which was cool. That was a nice character arc for him, but...
Yeah, I mean, that worked great.
But it's like, that also was just kind of a thing that was left there, where it's like, you have this feeling that Whedon wanted to have a dissolution of the team by the end, or Marvel said, no, there has to be a new lineup.
Well, I like the idea of the team, disassembling at the end, and then, Cap and Black Widow creating a new one, and everyone else sort of retiring. But they didn't really play that. It kind of happened off screen, and you had to kind of catch up, and everyone was still so happy.
Yeah.
Like, it ended on such an upbeat note, which is fine for the final note, but there was no Thor just went back off to Asgard as if he wasn't on the team anymore, but
there was no tragedy in there.
No, he went off back to Asgard last time, and he was in this film, so what's the difference? Iron Man, I guess, retired.
In general, there was just no tragic element. Like, what you were saying about the upbeat ending, I actually think it would have been a good idea to not have it be that, because then it would have been different. Like, instead of, like, more, they beat the villain and everything's okay, it's like, have something where it's like, no, this actually isn't okay. Not everything's going to be resolved that quickly.
Yeah.
And that would have led into Civil War perfectly.
Instead, everyone was just smiling, and Tony was happy, and Cap was happy with Tony, and Thor went off to be in a third film that hopefully is good.
And Scarlet Witch got a new awesome costume, and the Vision was there just being the Vision.
The Vision!
Falcon has a costume, thank God.
I will say, the one thing I cannot complain about in this movie is Vision. Except for his lack of screen time. More Vision is always better Vision.
The Vision was perfect. The Vision was perfect. I mean,
being the Vision.
The very fact, like, everything, all the little touches, like, the fact that he can lift Thor's hammer, that was awesome. The fact that he created his cape based off of the fact that Thor has a cape. He just looked at him and said, okay, I gotta have a cape.
That's what these guys do, they go capes.
And that amazing ending scene where he and Ultron just wax poetically about the events of the film before Ultron just kind of accepts his fate, attacks out of just kind of a need to go out fighting, and Vision just takes him out really quickly. Like, that was actually my favorite scene in the movie, probably, was just those two synthetic life forms commenting on what it means to, live, essentially.
The movie definitely needed more of that.
Yeah.
Vision all the time.
And I get the fact that the Vision couldn't have been in there from the beginning, but...
I love how much build-up the Vision gets. Like, he's a big goddamn deal.
He is. He comes out like Jesus.
He's Jesus in the film. And once again, going into the idea, I mean, Tony gave birth to Ultron, Ultron gave birth to the Vision destroyed Ultron.
Yeah.
See, it would have made more sense if they just put, like, Age of Vision. It's not as catchy. But, I mean, the movie is way more about, like, the birth of the Vision and his importance to the cinematic universe, which I really hope they stick with. I hope he becomes a very important character.
Oh, he's already announced to be in Civil War, so he's definitely going to play more of a part.
Well, I kind of figured like they've just made the new Avengers, and then they'll be in Civil War, and then they'll immediately get broken up in time for the original Avengers to get back together for Infinity War.
If anything, I think Infinity War is going to be all of them.
Yeah, they'll be in there too, but I think like the original team will get back together, and the newbies will kind of get shunted to the side.
Hey, Vision's always on the team. That's his thing.
Vision, if anything, Vision is going to be retroactively made to be a part of the original team. Because he's the Vision.
I think they should just have him replace like Adam Warlock.
Nobody wants to see Adam Warlock. Nobody wants to see Adam Warlock.
Hey, he already has...
Instead of Adam Warlock, we just have the Vision. Although, thinking about it, Thanos' plan is to take all the Infinity Stones, and one of the Infinity Stones is powering the Vision right now. So I'm guessing at a certain point that's going to get plucked out of his head and that'll essentially kill him.
Yeah.
Well, then he's reborn as Young Vision from Young Avengers. Still played by Paul Bettany.
No, what they do is they just introduce Wonder Man.
And then rip his soul out.
Yeah, that's boom, done. Like all in 5 minutes. I'm Wonder Man! And then he dies immediately.
I just want to say the words introduced Wonder Man should never be said. But, yeah, I think the Vision is definitely the thing where it's like, there were so many ways to get that wrong, and there were no ways that they did it wrong. It was just so right. Like, Paul Bettany is perfect in that role. The makeup is perfect. The CG combination is perfect. Like, everything. Like, even... I actually went out of the movie thinking he didn't even phase in the movie, and Mike actually corrected me on that and said he does phase at some point. So he does all the Vision things.
It's mostly him just, like, phasing his fist through other robots.
Yeah.
We've been shitting on the movie a lot, but I do actually, I mean, Age of Ultron is probably one of my favorite Marvel movies, but it's one of those movies you have to kind of enjoy with an asterisk, because there's a lot of wasted potential in it.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know what a good comparison would be in terms of Marvel movies, in terms of superhero movies in general. Like, I don't know, the early 1989 Batman, that movie's got a ton of problems. If you look at it from even like a simplistic narrative standpoint, but at the same time, it's an insanely enjoyable movie. Like, it's kind of the same deal here where it's like, yeah, it's got a lot of problems, and it almost suffers from being more sophisticated in that way, but because it tries to outdo the first movie and doesn't really accomplish that. But at the same time, it's a good movie to sit down and watch, and really it gets a lot of the job done. Like, it gets a laugh, it gets raw emotion in there, it gets a lot of great stuff that a lot of the other Marvel movies, like the less successful Marvel movies, really don't. So it's still, I think, one of the better ones. It's just...
It should definitely be commended for being able to pull off any of what it's able to pull off and still be a good movie. Because most wouldn't be able to do that.
No.
So it's still actually pretty impressive.
Much like the first Avengers film, it's like we didn't know it would actually turn out good. If anything, it was setting itself up for failure.
I just wish there was more to Ultron himself. I think that would have really boosted the film up and been more
Tony.
And just to have Ultron more as just the villain they're all fighting against, so other stuff can happen. I think that's really a big sticking point. He's just sort of, I mean, he's fun to watch, tons of entertainment value, certainly memorable. And I did think maybe we needed to tone down just how Whedon snarky and weird he was, just to get a little more, dramatic Ultron in there. There's some nice moments of that in there, but...
Well, if they would have gone more into the influence of Stark, then that could have been justified, but they didn't.
Hear me out. This is actually one giant marketing stunt for Ant-Man. They make an Avengers film that's very over the top, very stuffed, and people realize, like, man, I am tired of seeing villains trying to blow up the universe. What's this Ant-Man character about? He seems small.
Just a nice heist film, no big deal.
Yeah.
Some laser cannons.
Villains, Yellow Jacket, he just wants simple things. He wants to
and
blow
then
stuff up.
2 months later, everybody goes to see Ant-Man, because no one's going to see Ant-Man otherwise.
Yeah, Ant-Man is getting terrible traction so far in terms of just nothing being impressive.
And just think, they can burn Avengers, because they know no matter what. They could have filmed a turd for 2 hours and still make like $1 billion. That was going to make money no matter what. So if they sacrifice the quality of Avengers 2 to get people funneled into Ant-Man, well, there you go. I'm on you, Marvel.
I don't like how much sense that actually makes.
Damn you, Marvel.
Damn you, Marvel, and your insidious plans.
So, what other positive things do you guys have?
I like the Vision.
I really love the dynamic of the entire team. Now that they're formed, I really love the fact that the film really focused on the team as a unit as opposed to individuals coming together. Like, I love the interplay, and I love the fact that they all know each other's tics, and I just love how they function as the Avengers. Like, I actually really love the fact that they were so well coordinated in the beginning, and they have Avengers Tower with, like, all these advanced tech going around them, and they have Maria Hill even working for Stark now, and they just seem to have a really good, like, status quo going on before Ultron comes along, and I really love the continuity there where it seemed to build towards a fully formed Avengers team. Like, I liked the way that was played around with, and I liked how it seemed to be natural as opposed to just kind of forced in.
I think it was smart how they finally found someone to pair Thor up with. Because normally there's good interplay between all the characters, but Thor is just, he'll make kind of an outlandish comment and someone else will kind of brush it off. This time they had Vision and Thor that could kind of bounce off each other. They have like their moment where they're talking about the heft of the hammer, and it felt good for Thor to finally have like a buddy type character,
Yeah, definitely.
The Vision imprinting on Thor and printing out a cape that looks just like his, lifting his hammer. He finally has someone he could kind of develop personality with. Whereas in the other movies, Thor kind of stands solo. He's a superpowered being among less superpowered beings.
Yeah. And also, I just want to point out, there is a Tumblr page now dedicated to Thor and Vision /fiction. So if you want to check that out.
That was fast.
Yeah.
I will not
it was
the link.
Yeah, it was there in like 2 days. It was pretty incredible.
I saw the ones where people were like shipping Wanda and Vision. I'm like, that one just makes sense. You don't even know.
That look they shared.
Oh, by the way, that was another positive I want to bring. I love the foreshadowing. Just one scene of them foreshadowing that. Like, the fact that was even put in there at all makes me just happy.
Well, there's not that much to it. It's just a small glance. It could mean anything.
Yeah, I know, but it's
more
like...
like we were just reading into it too much. I
think it was definitely intentional. I mean, they know the comics.
A little set.
Yeah.
For some android sex.
They know how, they really put in Wanda's love for Red. It all makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Scarlet Booty.
And the other thing I really liked was Black Widow was probably one of my favorite parts of the film. Ironically, considering all the Black Widow controversy.
Beep, beep.
Yeah, I don't really want to get to that because but the Black Widow seems to be a letter of love from Whedon, like in terms of a character that he really identifies with, because the parts of her backstory that they get into are really kind of very interesting. Like, it makes me want to see a Black Widow movie all the more.
Well, too bad.
I know.
And speaking of tangentially related to Black Widow was Banner's character arc. I thought was one of the stronger high points of the film, actually. Which was really giving him something to do.
Yeah, it was surprising because, like, the first Avengers was more just, like, it's more his status quo, and, like, you kind of get something at the end where it's like, I'm always angry and I always have control over this, and then he turns into Hulk, and then there's a big action sequence. But in this one, it's like, they give him more than just he's constantly on the run. He's always a danger to himself. It's like, they give him more of a, he's doing good, and then he does really badly.
I just wish they would mention Betty. That's all. Just a mention.
In an offhand way, I mean, calling the Hulkbuster Veronica, kinda?
I thought that was actually a reference, yeah.
Yeah, that's what everyone seems to be saying. I have no idea if that's true or not, but it seems like it's expected to be a reference.
I wouldn't put past Whedon for that to be a reference. That actually seems like something he would do. Because otherwise, I have no idea why it was named Veronica.
Yeah, it wouldn't make any sense as anything else, so.
Betty's dead at this point, let's just face it.
Okay, another positive. The Hulkbuster fight. That was pretty awesome.
That was pretty incredible, yeah.
Like, I mean, I think it lived up in a lot of ways to all the hype that was built towards it, because it's like, it literally is what it's advertised to be. Just a big smash up between Banner and Tony even barely, like, managing to survive. Though it's amazing that the Hulkbuster has a history in the comics of always failing, and this one, it doesn't really fail.
Yeah, it gets the job done in the end.
Man, we've all been waiting for the Hulkbuster armor since Iron Man 1, so it definitely lived up to all the build-up of that.
Yeah. Especially the fact that it's created by both Stark and Banner, which I think was really important to kind of establish that. And it also just makes it that dumb inclusion in Iron Man 2 of Igor the robot as a kind of a stand-in for the Hulkbuster, it made up for that, in my opinion. That 1 second shot.
Sigh.
Remember how everyone was overanalyzing every Iron Man armor in Iron Man 3? Like, this is the space one. He's gonna meet the Guardians of the Galaxy at the end. Oh, that's the Hulkbuster. No.
And then he destroyed them all.
Because Iron Man 3 was about important things, like love.
Did they even explain where the fuck Pepper was?
Well, yeah, they kind of explain where Portman's, I'm blanking on it, Jane.
Paltrow. Oh. Oh, Jane? Yeah, nobody cares about it.
Yeah, Jane, well, what I'm saying is they had an offhand invention towards Jane and, Pepper not wanting to be a part of their, testosterone-filled world or whatever. Which is kind of just saying they couldn't contractually obligate them to come back.
There were enough characters in that film.
Yeah.
That's like to pretend they're all off camera the entire time. That'd be great. They actually just record, like, Gwyneth Paltrow saying her lines, but they just don't show her.
They just use other recordings from the first couple films.
Outtakes and whatnot.
What I want to know is, what was Daredevil doing during all this?
Being blind.
Wow. Well, he didn't see any of it, that's for sure.
Yeah, in a different country. There was no reason for him to... He's not going to get on his blind jet and fly over there.
Good.
His blind jet?
What kind of jet? Like, Wonder Woman's got an invisible jet. What kind of jet would Daredevil have? The Devil jet?
He would have the Catholicism jet.
Just a giant cross.
It runs on shame
Jesus on
and
top.
guilt.
It runs on trauma. It feeds into the trauma in his mind. So every bad thing that happens to Daredevil powers his engine.
Those aren't chemtrails. That's the blood of Christ.
Well, that thing must go supersonic then. That's such impressive.
Like the death of Elektra, it powers for like 50 lifetimes.
I imagine Daredevil piloting a plane would be the worst, because his super senses wouldn't really help him in that scenario so much. Like, he'd just take off and be actually blind.
Well, in order for him to actually pilot a jet, he would have to have all the windows open so he could feel the air currents. And at that point, he's just suctioning himself out. Like, he just takes off and all of a sudden, ah!
That's what I want to see for Daredevil 2. It's just a full episode of him trying to understand planes.
God, being Daredevil is terrible.
Foggy, help me.
He just ends up smacking his head on the side of a plane.
Kill me, Foggy. Kill me.
Oh god, can you imagine Daredevil in space? This is the worst!
My eyes are exploding. Oh,
I can't smell shit.
Yeah, Daredevil in space would be the ultimate no-win scenario for that character.
Wow. So that's how you defeat him. Get on that shit, Kingpin.
Yeah, seriously.
He's got the money.
So, Cody.
Yes.
Should we take a trip?
Dare we? Dare we go to the land of the trolls?
Like you said, dare, after we talked about Daredevil for 10 minutes.
Segway!
It's a bit.
Anyways, it came from IMDb. And boy, did it. I am looking at the front page of the IMDb message boards right now, and I can just tell it's full of dumb. It starts off innocuous enough. Who is your favorite Avenger? Alright, why not? That's cool. Someone just lists the entire team. That's pretty dumb. Oh, that's what they're all doing. They're just putting them in order instead of just saying their favorite Avenger. They didn't read.
Those are all the Avengers.
Did any of them just say Captain Kirk, please?
First one lists Iron Man as his favorite, but then he also puts Quicksilver as his second favorite, so I'm going to say he's dumb. Next guy says Captain America, followed by Black Widow, Iron Man, Hulk, then Quicksilver, then Hawkeye. War Machine outranks Thor and Vision, so also dumb. Wow, all these guys have put Quicksilver in like their top 3. I can't look at this. I feel dumb already. Next one. Why not? Let's have a cross battle. Can Iron Man ever overtake Batman?
Yeah, you can.
There we go. Okay, question answered.
He would shoot him. Yes.
In the face, because he has an exposed face.
Let's see what Donnie T92 has to say. He's very confused with the timeline, ellipses. I'll admit I don't follow everything that happens in the Marvel Universe, but I could never turn down a good superhero movie. Except for apparently he has, because he doesn't pay attention to all the Marvel movies. But whatever. With that being said, I am so confused. The timeline has me utterly puzzled. First of all, what about all the older Marvel movies? Spider-Man 2002, oh dear God. Wolverine, All X-Men movies, Fantastic Four, Hulk, Daredevil. Do any of these films tie in with the Avengers or the
Why
current
did Joe
Marvel
Chill not
Cinematic
turn into
Universe?
the Joker during Batman Begins?
Should everything prior to Iron Man be ignored? Why does Marvel have phases now and never did before? I'm just trying to understand their methods a little more, and I'm especially trying to understand if the old movies fit into the current timeline at all.
Marvel always had phases. What are they talking about? That was their plan from Iron Man 1 on.
Then the second guy did not read the post, so he just comments, the movie is possibly one of the worst edited big-budget movies ever. This is where the movie failed big time. But no one's putting the blame on Whedon himself. For all we know, Whedon shot a lot of really disjointed scenes that resulted in panic in the editing room to save the movie.
What disjointed scenes?
I don't know. He also blames the reshoots as being a sign that the movie was shitty, which is weird because every Marvel movie has had reshoots.
Every movie
does, so.
Yes, every single movie in existence.
I like how he gets called out, the third guy. You didn't actually read the post, did you? He didn't. He just came in, saw timeline, and was like, I know what to do.
Oh, I just vomited all over his keyboard. He pressed the keys, the weight of it, pressed the keys down.
Oh, God. The next guy got way too into his system. Rate your top 10 Marvel characters. Post starts superheroes/villains/agents/supporting roles/whatever, based from either the comics/movies/TV shows rating system 10 points for your top character, counting down to 1 point for your last choice. I will try and update the list as best I can. Apparently he's taking votes from everyone in the thread, and he's forcing them to do it out of 10, and he's forcing them to do it from comics and movies, and
also 10 down to 1.
Yeah, so you gotta pick your top 10. According to his updated list, Spider-Man is number 1, followed by Captain America, then Daredevil, then Iron Man, Wolverine for the top 5. There you have it. That's the definitive ranking. He's quantified it. That's all it can ever be.
That's kind of actually close to my ranking.
See,
I'm surprised by that.
The next one, I don't know what's going on, but the next guy, Spider-Man, mechanical versus organic web shooter. I think he got lost at some point because I saw zero Spider-Man in this movie.
We don't know. I mean, he could have been.
He could have been really small.
I would like to, that Ant-Man in the whole movie thing. I would like to see the organic web shooter as we saw it in the Raimi series. It was magical. I won't want to see the mechanical shooter that I saw in the Web's terrible TASM. Organic shooter is way better than the mechanical shooter. What do you think, guys, of it? Well,
can we start
opinions?
saying that? What do you think, guys, of it?
What do you think, guys, of it? Don't make fun of dyslexics.
That should be an official Box Office Pulp term from now on. What do you think, guys, of it?
What do you think, guys, of it? Well, what say you?
What do you guys think of it, Age of Ultron?
I've never had a strict opinion on mechanical versus organic web shooters. I guess whatever trips your trigger.
And they both feel web.
Yeah, they're both not real things that do the same thing.
I guess in one, Peter constantly has to be reloading his web cartridges, which could be cool or dumb.
Well, at the end of the third Spider-Man film, he says he doesn't need it anymore, and he throws the web shooters into the ocean. So that's how that works. That was an Iron Man 3 reference.
I see what you did there.
I think this title of the episode should actually just be rebranded to Box Office Pulp Iron Man 3 Revisited.
Oh, dear God. Okay. The last thing on the first page, the Russo brothers or the Coen brothers? Make them fight! I mean, the latter made some semi-notable movies like Fargo, Big Lebowski, and No Country for Old Men. But the Russos made Captain America 2, probably the most important movie in the 21st century.
Okay.
I mean, I love Captain America 2, but I mean...
boy, I'm just trying to find some brain cells somewhere here. This is how and why Marvel destroyed DC on the big screen. I see a lot of fanboy comments about Marvel just being Disney movies, but at least Disney can produce a good film with more than one character. I thought this movie was brilliant and much better than any of the Batman reboots. Somebody should tell them that they've got more than 2 characters. I never read the comic books, so I have only seen the movies and TV shows, and every Marvel movie since I Am One have been great, and I believe that makes 11 in less than 10 years compared to, 3? Now, I've got nothing against DC. I enjoy their TV shows, because there's more of them. I just get sick of the DC fanboys saying that Disney can't produce a decent movie when you've only got to look at the earnings from each movie and Marvel coming out on top each time. Just a couple of questions. Who was that woman's voice in Stark's suit? Why didn't the Hulk hang about and at least put what I assume is a big green schlong into Romanov? That's a joke in case the State the Obvious crew pop by.
I don't even know how to react to
So
that.
Watson 35, you have confused me. I'm gonna leave your comments alone. Next up, an evil robot is trying to kill my friends, and so I go hide at my house, where my wife and kids are. Does that make sense to you?
Hawkeye
Well,
constantly makes
it's
bad
not-
decisions.
It's Hawkeye's family also, so nobody really cares.
Yeah. And really, to be fair, it's Hawkeye, so you expect him to do something dumb.
Going back quickly to the idea of Hawkeye having a family, was anybody else just kind of okay with that? Because a lot of people seem to either hate that or love that. It was like,
Yeah, I was fine with it.
That was fine, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Ultimate Hawkeye, but whatever.
Does anyone get that bent out of shape out of anything Hawkeye does?
It's like, we were never going to get Fraction Hawkeye, so why complain about it?
That's true.
Yeah. Also,
I'm telling
it's
you,
like,
they just need to murder his family off, and they could have wacky adventures in the next movie.
He still acted like Hawkeye, so I mean, yeah.
Plus, I don't think anybody's really in love with the idea of him just being another womanizer. It's like, okay, that's the part of his character that people latch onto.
I like there being a family man character in the film.
Like, people were incensed by the fact that, he can't one day make love to Black Widow, even though she's clearly moved past him.
I like them just being, buddies.
Yeah. Because it's like, it'd be cliche if there were a couple.
It's been cliche in the comics. Then it's just like, hey, look, a male and female character who are just friends.
Yeah.
Isn't that pleasant?
Plus, it's like, it gave Hawkeye something to do. Why are you complaining? He needed something to do.
And played up the Hawkeye's gonna die gag really well.
Yeah, the whole time we're all sitting there like, yep, any minute now. Okay, what else you got for me, IMDb? Oh, can you make your own wise quote like Batman, the Joker, Bane, and etc.?
What?
I clicked on the thread to try and get clarification. All they posted was, I don't believe I'm that wise. That's all. That's it.
I think that's a good question to end on.
Wait, there's also one comment, Colby Smulders is hot.
I agree.
Yes, that one is
Yeah, we all
absolutely
agree.
correct.
What? Yes.
Beautiful one.
I have one more question, though.
Is it San Andreas being better than AOS? Because that's one of the threads here.
Maybe. But, I mean, we've talked pretty much almost entirely, fairly negatively about the film. But why do you think people just act so horribly towards it that it's just such a terrible goddamn film? What do you think that comes from, exactly?
I think it's because the fact that they expected it to be the film to end all films as far as Marvel goes, because it was the sequel to the Avengers. I mean, it was designed in their minds to be this thing that was going to make Winter Soldier look like Thor: The Dark World. It was going to be the thing that broke everyone's minds in terms of how awesome it was. It didn't end up being that, and because of that, they're lashing out because they feel like they didn't get what they wanted.
Well, they had a great run. They had Captain America 2, they had Guardians of the Galaxy. Everyone was going for the hat trick.
Well, yeah, but what people constantly think about the Marvel movies is that they always have to one-up the other. They always have to escalate. They always have to be better than the last one, which is not a realistic expectation.
I think people were expecting the magic of of Avengers, which there was never going to be a way to recapture that because you've already seen it for the first time.
Yeah.
So, and I think Age of Ultron, for the most part, is a better made it is a better made film than the first Avengers. I don't think it's as good as the first Avengers.
It's not as tightly made. It's better made, but it's not as tightly made.
Yeah, its problems definitely stand out more. I think it's maybe a little bit more plain than people are expecting when it's all kind of said and done.
Yeah, I think ultimately the answer to your question is people expected way too much out of it, and because they didn't get that, they're proclaiming it to be worse than it actually is. I mean, it's the same effect that we see with a lot of book movies that actually ended up being really good, but people just kind of turn their nose at, like The Incredible Hulk. It's like, oh.
People only work in extremes.
Yeah. It's like, if this movie does not end up being amazing, then it's worthless, because every comic book movie needs to be amazing. Every comic book movie needs to be The Dark Knight. Like, no, it doesn't.
I blame Mad Max. This comes out, it's entertaining, it's enjoyable. Then Mad Max comes out, and just blows your fucking mind. It's all downhill from there.
Look, Max has gone through enough. He lost a kid. Cut him some slack.
His world is fire.
And blood.
And chrome.
Shiny, shiny chrome.
Go see Mad Max Fury Road, is what you're saying.
Please do. I want a sequel so bad.
Hey, we're getting 3 more, 2 of which are prequels.
And
I'm very confused by that.
And also, not to confuse anybody, also go see Avengers Age of Ultron. It's not a bad film.
Goofer, I don't fucking care.
Cody, did you enjoy Age of Ultron?
I did.
See?
If Cody says he enjoyed it, then that's the law of the universe, of the cinematic universe.
You'll enjoy it no matter what just because it's got the Vision.
That is
Box Office Pulp recommends The Vision.
So good.
Box Office Pulp recommends having no strings.
I will say, in theaters, I was watching it the second time, and one of my friends turned to me and was like, I don't like this. I don't like this at all. As soon as the string part came on, she was creeped out.
I did like how it's canon that Ultron sings that.
He's just really into Disney.
As it should be, is the most Ultron song.
Also, Ultron just singing in general. That quick scene of him flying the jet ends while singing. It's like, that was amazing.
Box Office Pulp was also sterilized. I had to do it once. Sorry.
Just once. Just see what it's like.
It had to be done once.
Too soon, Mike.
Should probably wrap up now.
No, we're gonna let it awkwardly linger. You deal with your choices.
You be Tony Stark of this scenario, Mike.
We're not leaving until you feel guilty about your actions.
Well, it's not gonna happen, Box Office Pulp Civil War next month.
God damn it.
I'm with James Nito.
I'm with Box Office Pulp guy.
Every time James walks into the podcast.
Can that be canon?
I think so. We'll record it, and every time he walks onto the show, he'll be very confused at first.
For a second, I thought you were just gonna go with his theme from First Class, but I like that more.
I can't do that one offhand.
Dun it.
Dun it, dun it, dun it, dun it, dun it.
It's literally it. It's actually kind of a simple song, really.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
So memorable. Anyway, if you like this weird-ass show,
for God knows what reason,
go to pulppodcastnetwork.wordpress.com and check out all of our other fine podcasts. And remember to subscribe to us on iTunes and Stitcher.
Also visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/boxofficepulp.
Yes, and our website is, of course, boxofficepulp.blogspot.com, where you can find all subscription links.
We'll see you in your dreams. No, not actually. We haven't made that technology out yet, but it's coming. In the meantime, internet. Do internet. Check our other podcasts out. Please, for the love of God. We'll not give you money, but we'll pretend like Monopoly money. We might send that to you if you actually listen. Anyways, that's a wrap.
Now, quick, everyone. Jump into your secondary robot bodies.
And like that, he's gone.
I have no strings to pull me down, make me fret or make me frown. I had strings, but now I'm free. There are no strings on me, because they're impossible.
What if Ultron just got really into Dumbo instead?
Can we just marvel at Pinocchio Bane there? That was incredible.
Pinocchio Bane. This is Box Office Pulp Guy, and this has been a Pulp Podcast production. Now please, 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 put a gun in my mouth and pull the trigger and say goodnight.
And now, on with the show.
Mr. Johnson, have you heard about those people who don't know about our podcast?
Yes, sir. I've heard of them.
Do you think anyone who doesn't know about our Southern Theme podcast should go to jail?
No, sir.
Do you think anyone who has heard about it but hasn't listened to our podcast should go to jail?
No, sir, no.
Do you think anyone who refuses to listen to our Southern Theme podcast should go to jail?
No, sir, not really, no.
Then what should happen? What would be a fair sentence? Do they deserve to die, Mr. Johnson? Do they deserve to die?
Yes, they deserve to die, and I hope they burn in hell.
Matt Johnson was found innocent of all charges and resumed hosting his monthly podcast, Below the Bible Belt.